this way, he wants out. Dominique, I can't blame him. I'm going to start with you. Should Wentz worry about his NFL future at this point?
No, absolutely not. I think that his future in Philly is definitely in jeopardy, if not over. Like there is no future there for them. I think they've made it quite clear that he was a big part of the problem, and they're going to go with Hurts going forward, I suspect. But anybody who has the resume that he's had in a league that's always thirsty for quarterbacks is going to get another opportunity. And if you look at next season, there are teams with a lot of cap space who will need quarterbacks who won't be at the top of the draft. You could think of the Colts as a situation if the Rivers thing doesn't continue to pan out, which I suspect the Rivers will be retiring very soon. You have Frank Reich there, who is familiar with Carson Wentz. You could think of the Patriots, another situation. They're going to have a ton of cap space and probably going to need a quarterback of the future. And Washington's another situation where I guess it's in division, so it might be tough for a trade to happen. But these are teams that I think would it'd be worth considering Carson Wentz. Like, he's not going to be out of the league. He's not going to be relegated to being a backup. There are enough arrogant offensive coordinators and head coaches, or confident, depending on how you look at it, that believe that they can get the best out of Carson Wentz. And there are enough quarterbacks who are as bad as Carson Wentz, but don't have the high heights that Carson have reached. So I think it's worth a chance. The Eagles are going to have to eat a large amount of that cap number. So wherever Wentz ends up going, it's not going to be necessarily as expensive as it looks on paper. So I think that Wentz should be encouraged. I know it's hard to be in this moment, but he's going to get another opportunity, hopefully in another situation. What's up, Max?
Didn't you play in the NFL and go to Harvard? What kind of
just a little bit.
I have no words. Yes, I do. Look, here's the bottom line. You say, well, Reich is familiar with Carson Wentz. The more familiar you are with Carson Wentz, the less you're going to want him. Dominique, we thought Peterson was a bad coach. I thought he should be gone. Peterson's an excellent coach. Look, you see Jalen Hurts, right? Had the most chunk plays, the most touchdowns in the first half, et cetera, since Nick Foles. In either Nick Foles in 2017, I think, touchdowns and a half. Nick Foles in 2018, chunk plays. I mean, even Josh McCown in the playoffs, a 40-year-old on a bum wheel, produced the same results as Carson Wentz. They lost to Seattle by the same score in the playoff game that they did in Week 12 with Wentz. No, it's not. Remember Wentz is playing behind such a bad offensive line, supposedly? Yeah, but they're 11th in win percentage and block rate and pass protection and in run blocking, they're 4th and this and that. No. Do the eyeball test. Jalen Hurts seemed to do fine. Jalen Hurts seemed to do just fine. Not getting sacked left and right, not throwing interceptions. The chains are moving. The offense looks good. It looked good with Nick Foles. Remember when they were dead in the water 5 and 6, then they caught fire, and then they won in the playoffs? Carson Wentz, and then if that's not bad enough, Carson Wentz statistically the worst starter in the league this year, and you saw the downward trajectory second half of last year, which is why I was waving and jumping up and down about it. As if that's not bad enough, Dominique, he leaks if it was he who leaked, and do you think it was really the team? How does that serve them? He leaks the day of this kid's second start, Jalen Hurts' second start, that, I want to leave if I can't start. What? He's a bad teammate. And on top of all of that, you want him in the building with his bloated contract, his arrogance, his not taking direction, his throwing interceptions, bad decision making. By the way, hasn't moved the same since the injury, forces things, clearly doesn't take coaching. You want that dude at $50 million in your building?
You haven't said one lie, and I agree with all of that. You've made a great argument for why people shouldn't give Carson Wentz another chance. I was one of the first off of the Carson Wentz bandwagon, in part because I saw this regression coming, and also in part because I love arguing with Dan Orlovsky, and he was telling me that Wentz is better than Dak, and I just wanted to get off the bandwagon. So trust me, I am not a Carson Wentz apologist. Like, I am not saying that he deserves another chance or he's good enough to get another chance. But you mentioned my experiences in the places I've been and the place I've gone to school and the jobs that I've had before. That experience, watching the NFL, is the only experience that I need. I don't need to have played in NFL or gone to a fancy school. I've watched the NFL my whole life. Name a time when a first-round pick who had at least one great season in the NFL does not get a second chance. Like that is the nature of this league. I don't know. You are asking me to predict something that has never happened in the history of this league. A first-round, tall,
Dominique,
strong quarterback like Carson Wentz, who also has a good season to point to, is not going to get a second chance to start in this league. That is absurd. That's the craziest thing.
He has. Well, you're changing. Yes. If you want to say, will he start a game again in his NFL career or several games? That's different than should he worry about his future. His days as a starter, like here's a season or two where you're the starting quarterback, are done. He will never get through the season as a starting quarterback for another team. And I'm not talking about injury. I'm talking about he's not good. He's not good enough to do it, and he has none of the intangibles.
Somebody will enter the season with him as a starter.
Tough. He's physically tough.
I bet you next year. We'll figure out a wager.
Max has been consistent. This is the land of second chances, everybody.
Chris doing. It's predicated on their running attack. It's predicated on their receivers and tight ends. It's not Baker. They've tried to simplify the game as much as possible, try to Kirk Cousins this offense in a way that they don't ask a whole lot from Baker. And the same thing is true, frankly, of Ben Roethlisberger, is they try to surround him with a lot of great playmakers, and he makes short completions in hopes that they can turn it into something bigger, and they have that outstanding defense to help him. That's not the same situation in Baltimore, especially now with the injuries to their secondary. They are relying on Lamar Jackson more and more, and he seems to be coming up, at least in the last game, last couple games, honestly, he seems to be coming up bigger and bigger. Though he hasn't done it all season, he's doing it at this moment as they head into the playoffs. I don't know how you could argue for anybody else in this division.
Unfortunately, we agree about this. I think it is Lamar, but I have a few things to say about that before I tell you my thoughts about the other two guys. Number one, Lamar Jackson, I do trust him the most, and I saw what he did against the Browns, and that really showed something. You know, when they needed him to, he got back out on the field on fourth down and touches the ball, and boom, touchdown pass, first thing on fourth and 5. And then 4 completions, right, to get him in field goal range. After Baker marched him right down the field. That showed some stuff. But when you say who do you trust the most or who do you have the most faith in, it's not just that Lamar hasn't won in the playoffs, Dominique. Lamar has beaten a lot of good teams in his career. It's not that, like, well, they know how to defend him now and there's nothing he can do. No, he's beaten very good teams, a lot of them already. But that's not really the issue to me. The issue is the 2 playoff games, yes, because if you want to win a Super Bowl, you must win in the playoffs. If you're in the AFC North, you must beat the Ben Roethlisberger Steelers. And if you're in the AFC, you must beat the Chiefs. He's 0-6 in those games. So those specific games where I'm like, those games where I'm really looking, okay, now I'm watching Lamar. He's played some of his worst football, in fact. And I think that is, until I see him beat those teams, I'll reserve judgment about whether I can trust him with the money on the line, right, even if at this moment I would take him in the division. Now, I'll tell you this. I trust Baker Mayfield more than Ben Roethlisberger right now. I didn't think I would say that earlier this season, but I trust Baker more than Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger can't throw the ball down the field. When he tries, it's usually a bad idea. And when you keep throwing those short passes, eventually guys are going to figure that out and start taking the ball away, as you have seen. Baker Mayfield, whatever you want to say, they simplified things, whatever. Baker is one of those guys who is highly dependent on his situation and coaching. That's most NFL quarterbacks. Very few Mahomeses and Rodgers and Bradys who are going to be great anywhere. It's just the degree of their accomplishment where coaching and situation matters, but they were going to be great no matter what. Most guys are not independently great. And Baker falls into the most guys category. But he had 4 head coaches in a little over 2 seasons to start his career. Head coaches, and they were all bad. Hugh Jackson, worst head coach in the league. Greg Williams just made a play call so bad, he's out of the NFL, probably for good. Freddie Kitchens was a disaster. The first time you gave him a good head coach, the first time, he's looking really good. So at this moment, I'll take Baker over Roethlisberger.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to argue. Like, I think Baker is doing well, and I picked them to make the playoffs this year. I'm impressed with how Baker is playing. But when you get down into the nitty-gritty of analyzing what's actually happening, like, Baker is making plays, and I think that Baltimore game is one example where he stepped up and he kind of put the team on his back for a short period of time. So I think he deserves credit for that. But let's not act like we haven't seen Ben Roethlisberger do that multiple times. If you look from game to game, who has more pressure and who delivers more often, I think it's Ben Roethlisberger through the course of this season. And I'm not going to boil all this down to recency bias because Ben is playing poorly right now and Baker is on a pretty good run. I think when you watch these games, who is asked to make the plays in big-time situations more often and who comes through more often, I think the answer is definitely Ben Roethlisberger over Baker Mayfield. And I'm glad that we don't have much to argue about the Lamar Jackson situation. I'm glad we agree on that, but it still feels like you're making it seem like it's closer than it should be. And you're pointing out these big games as if I understand he should win in those. You want the team to win in those situations, but it all doesn't fall on Lamar. And they played the Chiefs close a couple years ago. They played the Chiefs close and beating the Steelers without Ben Roethlisberger. It's tough to do when Ben Roethlisberger isn't playing. So when the Ravens were at their strongest, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't there. They definitely would have beaten them last year in that situation. The Ravens team has been decimated by injuries first, and then 4 different strands of the coronavirus goes through their locker room. They're having not the perfect season, but Lamar's putting them on their back. I think the question is pretty simple. The answer is pretty simple. And given that I'm from Baltimore, you look at Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are Drew Hill and he's Cisco. They are nothing without him. You look at Baker Mayfield, it's closer to Jodeci and he's like Mr. Dalvin. He's not KC or JoJo. That offense is built on the backs of that running game and that offensive line. And that's when you take one person out of the situation, there is only one Cisco in that whole division. The rest of them
what you're
are
pointing
Dalvin, Devontae, there's somebody else. Woody,
Lamar
Jazz,
Jackson.
they are not the man.
What are you going to go through You're going through every R&B group? Look, what you're pointing out is Lamar Jackson is differently talented. Lamar Jackson, if we're talking about who's the most talented, Baker Mayfield's okay. Like, he's got some talent, but he's not, oh, my God. And Ben Roethlisberger at this stage in his career also. Lamar Jackson's clearly the best. He's got the most. Now I got to see him do it with the chips on the line. And I pointed out where in games against those three different situations, he's 0-6 and he's almost undefeated the rest of the time. That tells me something. Mm-hmm. I thought the Browns game was a good step in that direction, but I still reserve judgment.
All right, the Ravens.